It's really, really great to see everyone here today. So before I start off, I'd just like to express my sincere gratitude for Mr. Shapiro for taking the time out of his extremely busy schedule to dedicate to the free seminar that I'm hosting today. So for those that don't know about him, he's actually a renowned real estate lawyer and has over 30 years of experience dealing with the most complicated matters in real estate. Also, I'd like to thank Home Life Golconda Realty for sponsoring this event. So with such a hot real estate market right now, there's a lot of investors that are looking for more ways to profit through assignments. However, investments without knowledge around taxes or the legalities could actually end up costing you a lot more. So here's a shocking fact, okay? The Canada Revenue Agency regularly approaches condo builders to look for assignors and unreported transactions. So if they ever find out that there is unreported transactions, they can actually assess a penalty equivalent to almost 50% of the amount owed. And interest would also be applied to both the amount owed and the penalty itself. So basically, as you can tell, assignments can be extremely lucrative, but if you assess the tax implications associated with it, the dollars actually start dwindling as fast as they're initially made. And if you ever want to maximize your profits, not only do you need to work with knowledgeable realtors, but you also need extremely experienced lawyers and accountants to help you steer clear of any potential pitfalls. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the screen over to Mr. Shapiro. And during the seminar, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email them to me for further assistance. Thank you, Gary.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for just saying 30 years. You made me feel 10 years younger. I got to tell you, you really gave a superb introduction to assignments. And I've been doing assignments probably for close to 10 years. And today, I think assignments are very tax driven. I think that your introduction on the taxation aspects of it were very good. And I think you gave a great overview of these issues. 5 years ago, I had clients that had multiple units in downtown buildings, and they were assigning them off and making incredible dollars on it. For better or worse, CRA now checks everything. You can't assume as an assignor that you're going to walk away and not get an audit. So I just want to pick up on a couple of points since you started with taxes. And I think some aspect of assignments are tax driven. Using a pre-printed form that OREA puts out, you will see that it says HST included. Very often, agents or clients that will say, why is it included? Why isn't it as per the original agreement of purchase and sale? Why isn't it in addition? That particular pre-printed HST provision simply states that with respect to the assignment, the assignee will not have to pay HST. We're not saying anything about the HST that may be payable or not payable on the builder's agreement, but just with respect to the assignment, if there is any HST to be paid, HST would be paid by the assignor. Let me pause there. I've used words like assignor, assignee, and just very briefly, let's just explain who are the players. The builder's agreement is between obviously the builder and the initial buyer, purchaser. The purchaser then goes and wants to sell or assign the contract to another buyer. So ultimately, this end buyer will be the party closing. So first purchaser, who is assigning, we put a label on calling that person the assignor. The ultimate buyer, the second buyer on the assignment, is the assignee. So, and you'll see in the agreement, it uses, like in an assignment agreement, the pre-printed form, it uses words like seller, vendor, and builder, developer. All those words are the same. That is the seller builder on the underlying agreement of the original agreement of purchase and sale. So what you should see if you're looking on one of these assignment agreements, it'll say HST included. Then there would be a provision in that assignment agreement that would say any capital gain, any HST, any of the taxes are paid by the assignor. And you may say, okay, I have a client who's going to be an assignor. Why would that assignor have to pay HST really when the original agreement says HST included? Well, that may be true, but under the original agreement. Now, what is that original agreement? It's HST on the original purchase price. So let's say the purchase price is $400,000. You're now assigning it for $500,000. So basically, you're making a profit of $100,000. Well, HST would be payable not on all the $500,000, because $400,000 of that $500,000 is in the original purchase price, and the HST on that $400,000 is dealt with in the original builder agreement. So an assignor would have to be required to pay HST on the profit amount. Certainly the profit. The $100,000 that is over and above what the original purchase price was. Now, capital, what are there any profit taxes? If you're doing an assignment, the government, and I don't necessarily agree with them, but the government will treat it as an investment, business income, and it's not capital gain. Now, let's just refresh ourselves on what a capital gain is. A capital gain is basically the profit, gross profit. Then you take your deductions that you may be qualified for. So let's say in my example, your profit's $100,000, you pay some commission, you pay lawyer, you pay some costs, and you bring down, let's say, your profit to $60,000, just throwing out a number. Well, the capital gain, the net capital gain would be 50%. So normally you would put 50%, which would, out of my example of 60,000, would be 30,000. 30,000 would go into your income. But the government doesn't treat it as a capital gain. They treat it as business income. So where capital gain is 50% taxable, business income is 100% taxable. So in my example, 100,000, deduct 40 for expenses, 40,000 for expenses, you have 60,000 net. You got to put 60,000 into your income tax revenue income, not the 30. Now, if you're going to say to me, hey, it's a one-off assignment for me. I bought one unit. I'm assigning the unit for whatever reason. Why should I treat it as business income? If anything, it should just be capital gain of anything. And I could agree with that. However, CRA, and by the way, the reason also is it's not like I'm a person who owns 10 condo unit contracts and I'm assigning them. It's not like I'm doing it as a business. I have one unit, I'm assigning one unit, that's it. CRA treats it as business income. Okay. Now, perhaps we should have started with what I'm going to deal with now, but Maya was great in talking about the tax aspects, and I just wanted to piggyback on that. So for some of you, what is an assignment? You can call it a transfer. You can call it, some people call it flipping, a flip. The word of flipping means like I'm taking my interest in a contract and flipping it over to another person. Over the years, I think the word flip has taken on a negative sort of meaning to it, like there's something improper or illegal. Listen, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing illegal about assigning. So let's get that straight. What are you assigning? You're not assigning the property. And we'll talk about condo units specifically, because assignment could be anything. I can have a resale home. I signed a contract for 1.5 million resale, long closing. Let's say it's not going to close until August. Someone comes and I'm able to find a buyer. I bought at 1.5. With this real estate market being so active, I can find a buyer who will buy for me, not for 1.5, they'll pay 1.7. So I'll assign my contract to that next buyer. So don't think of assignments as being pre-construction or being just condos. It could be condos, it could be townhouse, it could be condo apartments, condo townhouses, freehold, it could be resales. But what you're assigning is, excuse me one moment. I have my phone here. It's Friday. We do a lot of closings. And although I have my phone on mute, I see people, if there's problems, I may just take a couple of seconds out. In any event, on the assignment, it can be anything, could be resale or pre-construction. But an assignment is a transfer of one's interest in the contract. I'm not assigning the property per se, because I don't own it. I have an interest in buying it. That's what the agreement of purchase and sale is. It gives me an interest that on a certain day, I have a right upon payment of money to get good title. But up until then, all I have is a contract. And that's what I'm selling you. I'm selling the contract. The contract gives you a right, as I said, on a certain date, subject to certain terms and conditions, upon payment of certain monies, to acquire ownership. So think of it as selling the contract, not the property per se. A good starting point, especially for agents, is when you have a client, whether assignor or assignee, you got to get a copy of the builder's agreement and any amendments to it. Why? Especially for the assignee. One, you got to look at the assignment provision. Most agreements will say that you cannot assign unless you get builder's consent, and it's subject to certain terms and conditions. Very often, there would be an amendment to that contract that would give, that would amend it to say, under certain conditions, you can apply for builder's consent at a particular cost or no cost. So getting back, builder's condition says, no, you can't assign, transfer, lease, do a variety of conveyancing without getting builder's consent that can be arbitrarily withheld. And it doesn't even discuss cost at any cost. Then most people would get an amendment that says, yes, you can apply for consent upon paying certain monies or no money. Now today they make you pay the builder lawyer costs, which usually are around $1,000. And it's subject to conditions. One being, for example, that a certain stated percentage of the units in, let's say, a condo apartment building are sold. It may be 90%, 95%, because they don't want you competing, selling current buyer units when there's still a lot of units the builder is trying to sell. So the builder says, look, under certain conditions, one being that I've sold out 95% of the units, for example, I don't mind if you try to sell your contract because you're not really competing with me. In fact, some of these conditions would say, 95% or 90% of units have been sold, and they may say 100% of units on the one that you're trying to assign. So you got to be careful. And these assignment provisions say, You can't list it on multiple listing system. And some of them go on to say that you can't even have it on social media platforms. So people that are looking to assign would try to find agents that are known in the real estate market as having some kind of connections or network of people, or working for a real estate brokerage that they know other people or know people that want to buy or sell, as the case may be. But there are certain conditions that you just can't list it, and you got to be careful. Now, today, when you're signing a contract, again, going back to the underlying contract, there can be builder conditions. Do you want to buy a contract if you're acting for the assignee and you're putting down certain monies over and above the reimbursement of deposits the original buyer paid, if those condition dates have not been achieved yet? So, for example, there are two basic conditions. There can be three. One is builder says, if I don't get a certain percentage of sales threshold, I can terminate the agreement. And it could be 70, 80, 90, some sort of percentage. Usually a percentage that allows the builder to get their financing. Second condition that's usually very, that you would normally see, is getting financing by a certain date. And the third could be that the builder gets their zoning or rezoning in place by a certain date. These three conditions that the builder has, usually it's some date in the future. I'm seeing dates like, May 2022, May 2023. And by that date, if the builder doesn't satisfy those conditions, they have the right to terminate the agreement. If they terminate the agreement, deposits are returned. Well, think, if you buy a contract from an assignor, I'm an assignee, and I paid the deposits only for what was paid under the original agreement, and the builder terminates the agreement, I'm sitting with a contract that's going nowhere. The project will not get built, but I'll get my deposits back. Now think, what happens if I get builder's consent? The builder's conditions, the time has not expired. My assignment agreement says, when I get builder's consent, not only are you going to pay normally the reimbursement of the deposits gets integrated into the deposit paid, shown on the front page of the assignment agreement. But very often the assigner says, hey, I want my profit. I don't want to wait till final closing to get my profit. Thank you very much. So many deals where you have an assignee that has the money and doesn't need to rely on a mortgage, they would pay the profit within so many days of getting the builder's written consent to the assignment, which is a key condition in any assignment agreement. It's a condition precedent. You cannot have an assignment agreement without getting builder consent. That's a key condition. So in my example, I'm buying a $400,000 contract to buy a condo unit for $500,000. I paid it. I'm paying the assignor profit of $100,000. I paid the deposits, which the assignor is paid, but in addition, that $100,000 profit. Then, prior to interim closing, builder sends my lawyer or me, assignee, a notice. Sorry, we cannot get our financing. We didn't sell enough units. We couldn't get our rezoning, and it's within the condition period. We're terminating the project. And a couple of years ago, we heard stories about builders terminating projects. Now, what happens if you're an assignee and I paid the profit? Now my condo's not closing. How do I get my profit back? Now I got to chase after the assignor to try and get my deposit back. The profit back. The deposits I'll get back just because of carry-on protection, and the builder's required to give back the deposit money. But how do I get my profit back? So normally, if I'm acting for an assignee, I don't want to pay the profit until I know that that builder's conditions have expired. So if I'm buying a contract where the builder has already started construction, there's a hole in the ground and they started construction, or it's hit or coming close to interim closing, I know that the builder cannot terminate the project. If the builder goes bankrupt, for example, a receiver will come in and they'll still complete the project. But at least if I pay the profit at that time, I know I'm going to get my condo unit. Now, if I'm an assignor and I say, well, the conditions are not going to expire for another 6 months, but how do I know in 6 months? Here I'm giving you my builder's consent. Okay, assignee? But how do I know in 6 months you're going to have the money to pay me? Maybe you'll lose your job. Maybe something financial will happen and you can't pay me. So as an assignor, to protect myself, I'm going to say this. Pay the balance of the profit to my lawyer, who will hold it in trust. And upon the expiration of the conditions, and we know we got builder's consent, and we know that the builder can't walk away from the project, then you can release the money to the assignor. At least I know I'm getting my profit. The next area of importance in the builder underlying agreement are closing costs. All builders have, I don't want to say hidden costs, but they do have a series of closing costs like development charges, educational charges, park levies, Section 37 Planning Act costs. They may have, if the project is close to, adjacent, on top of a subway station, there might be charges dealing with TTC. As an agent for the original buyer or purchaser, or working on an assignment, if I'm the assignee, I want to know that there are caps, maximum amounts that the builder will charge, that it's not open-ended. So very often you'll see that there will be a contract that there'll be an amendment. That's why you got to get amendments as well, because there might be an amendment that the builder says for development and educational levies and charges, for example, if it's a unit less than 2 bedrooms, you pay $7,000 plus HST. 2 bedrooms and higher, you may pay $9,000, $12,000. But the original agreement didn't give you a maximum; it was open. So the builder, so for example, when we were closing deals on Emerald Park, I think it's Shepherd and Young, the builder there was no cap on Section 37 or on art, for example. And we were getting notices from the builder. The builder was charging $25,000 extra. Well, the buyers didn't have $25,000. It was sort of all of a sudden a surprise charge. So wherever possible, we'd like to, when we look at a builder's agreement, at that initial stage, there's a 10-day cooling off period. We want to see amendments as to what large closing costs have been capped. And if there's any that have not, we would write to the builder to say, hey, builder, you put a maximum cap on development charges and educational charges, but you didn't put a maximum cap on utility meters, or you didn't put anything on Section 37 Planning Act costs, or park levies, or art, or any of the other charges that a builder might be charging. So on the assignment now, I'm acting for an assignee. I want to get the builder's underlying agreement. I want to get the amendments. So before I'm going to have my assignee client sign the assignment, I want to know how much they're going to pay on closing with the builder. I want to see if there's any hidden costs. So I'm looking at the agreement and the amendment. I go to my assignee and I said, look, assignee, there are 4 major cost items that are not maximum capped. Development and educational, there was an amendment that capped it, but there are these other costs that are not capped. So if you sign this assignment, you may find out at final closing that you may get a surprise of some amount that you had not budgeted for. So what a way around it, I would say, as the lawyer for assignee, I say, Assignor lawyer, my client is troubled, or I would advise the agent I'm working with, look, Assignor, you have 2 items that are not capped. My client doesn't want surprises. So here's a suggestion. My client will pay the first 5,000 of those 2 items. Anything over, you pay. Or my client will cover the first 10,000 additional costs on those uncapped costs. But if it's over, you pay for it. Okay? So we covered off a number of items in the original builder's agreement that are issues that have to be dealt with in the assignment agreement. Okay, so let's go forward. On the assignment, the assignor, remember, the assignor wants to get as much money as possible, as quickly as possible. The assignee wants to pay the least amount as slowly as possible. So we have to find some compromise. Normally, there'll be an amount, sometimes equal to what the deposit amount is that the assignor has paid the builder. That will be on the front page. Assignors like to get their profit or all the balance of monies owing as soon as they get the assignment consent from the builder. Now, your assignee, that you have to find out, can they afford to pay all that money before final closing and the time that they would get their mortgage monies? Sometimes they can't, they don't have the cash flow to pay. Let's say it's 100,000 of profit. They can't pay that profit of 100,000 without getting their mortgage monies. They can pay some, but not all. So you have to stagger the payments to fit what the financial capability is of your assignee. Now, you may have an assignee that can afford it. So again, you got to take into account builder termination conditions, take into account the status of the project, but you got to work out how the monies will get paid. I want to touch on HST Housing Rebate, which is another sort of indirect tax. When you're working on an assignment, or let's go back. If you are buying the pre-construction unit directly as a first buyer and you qualify, what does qualify mean? I'm going to live there myself, or an immediate family member will live there, then I'm entitled to get an HST housing rebate that's not over $24,000. Now, on an assignment, as the second buyer or the ultimate buyer, I may live there. So normally I would qualify. But builders will not give an HST housing rebate credit, whether anybody qualifies when there's an assignment. And there's reasons for it. But if I'm any assignee on an assignment agreement, the builder will not give you the $24,000 credit, even if you qualify for it. Now, if you do qualify, you can apply after closing to get reimbursed the $24,000 or the amount that you qualify for, but you will not get it as a credit on your final closing. So, assignee, you better have cash flow to make up the loss of a credit. It's still the same purchase price, but where you would have had a $24,000 credit, therefore pay $24,000 less as the balance due on closing, now you won't have that credit. So you got to have cash flow in your pocket to make up the temporary loss of that credit. After closing, you can apply and get it back, but you won't have the money, you won't have that credit for closing. So assignees, you better have the money. Okay? Now, where you don't qualify, whether it's on the original agreement or an assignment where you don't qualify for HST housing rebate credit because you're leasing it out, for example, then at that point, you You won't have the credit. You wouldn't have it anyways. And you can apply after closing. If you qualify, if you're renting it out, subject to the conditions, you can apply for a residential rental rebate, which at certain price levels, thresholds, could be equal to what you would have received for the HST Housing Rebate credit. I think I want to make you aware of another point, and that is residency. You hear about Section 116 Income Tax Act. If you got to know that if you're acting for an assignee, you have to determine whether your assignor is a resident or not a resident for income tax. And now remember, a person can be a Canadian citizen, but not a resident. They may be working in Hong Kong. They may be working in London, England, New York. They're a Canadian citizen, but they've been out of Canada for so long, and they haven't taken exemptions or filed income tax returns, that although they're a citizen, they're not a resident for income tax. Now, if you don't handle that in the correct way, your assignee may end up getting footed with the bill to pay the government a withholding tax. Now, normally, there would be a form that a seller or an assignor who's a seller of the contract would sign that says, basically, I'm a resident under Section 116 for income tax. But if you're dealing with an assignor who's not a resident, or like certainly is living overseas, then you, acting for the assignee, have to have a proper provision in your assignment agreement that has some detail that the lawyer for the assignor has to hold back 25%. Normally, you would say 25% of the purchase price. And the purchase price here is not the purchase price under the original agreement. The purchase price is the purchase price shown on the front page of the assignment agreement. So in my example where I said the original buyer price is $400,000, assignment is going at $500,000, it's 25% of $500,000. Now, some sides say, well, it shouldn't have to be 25% of the purchase price, $500,000, because really it should be based on a profit. It's a profit tax. So the holdback of 25% should be just on the profit. If I'm acting for an assignee, I'd like to get 25% of all 500,000. If I'm acting for the assignor, I would push to say my 25% holdback only has to be on 100,000 or on the profit. In my example, 100,000 plus a deposit paid under the builder's agreement. So if my deposit was 100,000 to the builder as the assignor, and the profit is 100, I would hold back 25% of 200,000. If I'm acting for the assignee, I would push for 25% of 500,000, as per my example. Normally, it would be held back by a lawyer, and it wouldn't be released until I could provide the assignee's lawyer with a certificate of compliance. Does the assignor be asked to pay back HST rebate by the builder when he does assignment or the HST?
It's usually the assignee that's going to be asked, because it'll be part of the statement of adjustment.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I haven't seen any other questions.
Hold on. Important thing is also, I want in an assignment agreement, I want an affidavit or some similar paper signed by an assignor that says that no one has resided in the unit. Because if the assignor, we've hit interim closing and the assignor has leased it out or lived there, then the assignee would not be able to qualify for the HST Housing Rebate credit, and they couldn't even apply for it after closing. So I want to get paper signed by the assignor that no one has resided in the unit. That's key. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, what other questions? I'm
Well,
sorry.
but actually, the other day I signed up a client where they were the assignee, and because they did the occupancy,
Okay,
the builder
come in,
actually ended up
Come
giving
in,
them.
come in, come in.
Okay, so there.
So everyone, this is Kate Moon, and
Kate.
she's one of our
Hi.
associate lawyers here, and she's incredibly not just good.
Anyway,
And
okay.
okay,
So there are, and I guess this was an exceptional situation because usually when I sign up an assignee, they are the HST rebate is shown on the statement of adjustments, but the builder ended up giving it to them. They didn't have to pay on closing.
okay, there may be on an assignment that's really rare.
It's rare, but somehow this
Maybe
builder
there's
allowed
some,
it.
or the builder missed it. But
Possible,
I'm telling you to
it's
go.
also their option.
Telling you that do not count on getting the HST housing rebate credit.
Yeah, 100% don't count on that.
Don't count on it. Have cash flow.
Sounds good. I think I just saw another question popping in. Can the assignee reassign the assignment prior to the final closing?
By right of law, no. You would still have to get builder consent. Depends on the project, depends on the builder. But you would have to apply. I mean, if the builder allows it, yes, you could. In fact, during the beginning of our Zoom meeting, I said that you can assign resale it. And you don't need the seller's consent. And I've been on transactions during very active markets where the contract has been assigned not once or twice or 3 times, but even 4 times. But normally you will see in a builder's amendment allowing for assignments subject to conditions that no further assignments are allowed on that assignment. But there are times where the builder may agree, but you have to request consent. Another point I want to bring up, sometimes you'll see an amendment that allows for leasing. You got to be careful on that one. I usually, during the cooling off period, will write up to the builders saying that although there is an amendment allowing the original buyer to lease, that shouldn't automatically disqualify that buyer from getting the HST housing rebate credit if at the end they do qualify, that they haven't leased it out and that they are living there.
All right.
Okay, do we have another?
No, that's it.
Okay, I want to leave you with one final note. What I would suggest, it's a very difficult area. I want all of you to feel free to call either I or email I or Eva if you have questions. Yes, we would like to get referrals and get Assignor or assignee work out of it. But right here, we're here to help you carry on a better business. And we would rather give you sort of preventive legal help, assistance, before you have a problem. Ask us the questions. Even if your client is going to use a different lawyer, that's fine. We're here to help you.
Really appreciate it, Mr. Shapiro. Thank you for your kindness, and thank you, Ms. Moon.
Kate.
Oh, sorry, Kate. And yes, so I mean, we definitely look forward to working with you in the future. I mean, Mr. Shapiro has helped all of us significantly in the past as well on a professional level. So I would like to thank you guys today and thank everyone involved. And we look forward to another seminar, hopefully, in the future.
Look forward to it. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.